only seek to insulate your image and continue down the stream in the direction clout and credit steers. Directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears. Directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers. And then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers. Half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the Bezos fear condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reid came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of three-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that Tara Reid gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bares their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless. So don't you kid yourself that any lips are being loosened. They won't ever tell us where the bodies are or show us where the proof is. It's on you to recognize the lechery our president so regularly oozes. It's on you to muster up some honesty and ask yourself how Biden won your trust, but it's America that loses. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises.
They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. Gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. You are. They'll gladly
stagnate, a living wage, snap the chains, bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph or Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren. Say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights, forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near, and all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't. Perfect time for you to burn the bridge to self-forgiveness. Now's the chance, take a stand, stay your hand before you cast another vote for corporate interest. Another vote that chokes your hopes of owning your own home or opening a business. They love to say their hands were tied, the stars just weren't aligned for them to get their votes in line to see their promises delivered. But they killed it in an instant. Bills don't die by accident, they're all assassinated on behalf of the congressionally kismet, by some lobbyists who see themselves as agents of clandestine fate, not fences in a prison, dealing in the stolen goods of sleeping slaves and trading on the futures of...
We want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me, us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
We're live. We did it. We pressed the buttons.
We did it! Yay!
Yay!
Yay! Tommy somewhere! Yay!
Yay!
Everybody!
Run out.
Indie News Network.
collaborative family of independent content creators.
It's American tradition. It's indie. It's Jesse. What's up, everyone?
What's up, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden.
It's good to be here. Finally, I'm on Extra Bulla.
I'm Tatami of the YouTube channel Tatami's Diary.
Welcome to another episode of the show your parents warned you about. It's Reef After Dark.
This is Tatami Nation Politics.
Hey guys, this is Tommy, Tommy Nation Politics.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Politics of Survival.
Hello, my name is Lucy from Greenland Red Wine, and I'm very happy to be a founding member of INN.
Well, hi, everybody. It is, how do we miss that? We're also available on all your favorite podcast platforms. Again, Spotify.
On Twitter and Instagram.
YouTube.
Twitch.
Odyssey.
Facebook Live.
Discords and Telegram. And
Also on Amazon, Apple, Google Podcasts there also.
again, this is it. We use all these platforms to make sure that no one platform can shut us down. That's the other reason for diversification. They're trying to eliminate us.
It's kind of cool the way that these indie media networks, they operate differently than these other networks in that you're going to get honest opinions, you're going to get honest commentary because we're not sold out, but you're also going to get a lot of like unique personalities.
At Shutdown Amazon is now either co-opted or has explaining to do. In less than 1 month, he showed up to GQ, Teen Vogue, shaking Aunt POTUS's hand.
I still always like to say thank you and shout out the volunteers and the people that actually make this show happen.
I like it better than anything else.
Yeah, we know, Nancy. We know.
Guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. Free-thinking, innovative, and open-minded new independent progressive media.
We'll see you next time. This was the Politics of Survival.
You keep questioning everybody's motivations, and thank everybody for coming tonight, and we'll see you next week, and download the podcast. Bye, everybody.
Don't vote Democrat.
Keep listening to what little birds have to tell you.
Please wash your ass.
Keep fighting that good fight out there, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Who are these people?
What's up, everybody? There's another episode of INN News with me, Reef Breland, my lovely co-host, Care Bear, aka Collin, and below us, the lovely special guest, Savvy Sabs. How's everyone?
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you for being on. Finally get to have you. We've been talking about this for a few weeks at least, but yeah, we're so happy that you're here, joining us for the first time, actually. So welcome to our little community here. So just to be very transparent, you are crunched for time. So I think we should kind of get started. And then as we said to you off camera, when you need to dip, and we'll take over for the rest of the show. But again, we're glad you're here. So these are the stories I came up with. And I am going to talk about the DSA. Unfortunately, I know, Savvy, you've talked about this ad nauseum the last few days. This is what happens when I think of things on the weekend and everyone talks about stuff before we get to it on a Wednesday. So I will kind of talk about it a little bit. And then the other article that I brought in tonight is we've been hearing, a lot of our Western view on Ukraine. So we're going to have a look at what Africa, more specifically Zimbabwe, has to say. And I think this is kind of significant because we never hear about Africa at all. So it'll be interesting to kind of hear. This is the president of the Socialist Party in Zambia. We're going to hear an interview he did with the Black Agenda Report on his take on Ukraine. And then, Reef, what do you have?
I brought like a good substitute teacher. I brought videos because, why are we going to do real work when Savvy's here, So I brought some stuff from Joe, one of the best editors on Twitter. And his videos on the police state should be super short, hopefully. But great stuff. And I brought something that people in New York might be interested in, that essentially they've made insanity illegal now, and cops get to just pull people off the streets for whatever mental illness they think you have. So, Mayor Adams, who previously was a cop himself, if I'm not mistaken, decided to change some laws around. So we'll get into that, hopefully. But anyway, should we get started? I think
we should.
Hopefully. Savvy, if you want to right click my box and zoom and hit pin, so I'm like nice and big, so you don't have to like, you know, be looking at stuff like, I can't read it. I can't do it. But anyway, let's get started with these videos. So, at STFU shitlib2 on Twitter, aka Joe. You might see his stuff around. Member of INN, does some pretty great stuff on there. One of the best editors. I mean, Orf's having a lot of competition now with him. So, but you know, we decided to I decided to like cover some of his stuff since I saw CJ posting retweeting, I guess, the video. So I figured I'd make it a little segment since Joe's done a few of these, but I think Savvy, you've probably seen at least one of these, so you know, whatever. But we'll watch it and see what people think. So, action. I should probably have sound.
Resist! Don't resist! Don't resist, bro! I'm not!
What a coward. What a fucking snowflake little bitch that guy is.
Go fuck yourself.
Of course he's a bully coward. Of course, two types of people become cops, bullies and people who were bullied.
The police started off as slave patrols. That's where the police have derived from. And they still are slave patrols because the U.S. prison system has legalized slavery.
You terrorize their neighborhoods, you fucking maniac. You piece of shit. Snowflake. You terrorize those fucking black kids. That's why they say that. Because you're a terrorist, you fucking coward cop.
The police are here for nothing more than to protect assets, to protect property, and to protect rich and powerful people.
And that's why people want to defund your whole fucking profession, because you guys are such maniacs. You're like the Taliban. You're like ISIS occupying our fucking cities. Get the fuck out.
I can tell you, right here in DC, we have 40 plus police departments. So DC should be the safest city in the world, right? We should have no crime. Nothing. But yet, DC has a very high crime rate. It's almost like the police don't help crime. They don't solve crime. They don't prevent crime. They just show up after shit is over.
Cops are not angry! I'm telling you! Everyone likes us! Very pleasant interactions! You don't think you had a pleasant interaction? You didn't fucking have one?
So, black people's experience with the police and white people's experience with the police are very different. The ways in which the black people are, like the ways in which the police interact with black people versus how they interact with white people is very different.
Who wants some of this fucking pleasant policing? I'll give it to you. You want some of this pleasant policing? I got some more. I got buckets full, and all of these fucking guys got it for you too.
It's just truly unfair that people that have no experience with police brutality get to write the policy for people that are suffering.
I am not going to vote for a party that is justifying shit like this. And then the easiest thing that they say they're going to do is, oh, we just need to reform the problem. You can't reform this shit.
73% of white people have absolutely no contact with the police throughout the year. 73%.
But if you have a badge and a gun and you kill a black man, you get a paid vacation. You get rewarded for your brutality, your oppression, your racism, your disdain and contempt for the lives of others because they have a different pigment in their skin.
If we want safer communities everywhere, we need to invest in communities everywhere.
And it's not just a few bad apples, all right? I counted 6 bad apples choking Eric Gardner.
And then on top of that, no empathy, right? You know, people talk about it's justified. Fuck you, it's justified.
I counted 4 bad apples choking George Floyd.
Right.
Thinking that you can reform a rotten fascistic part of the system is pointless. And if we know that the changes we want will not occur, what now?
I counted 3 bad apples murdering Breonna Taylor in his sleep. I counted 3 bad apples murdering Ahmaud Arbery. I counted 2 bad apples murdering Rashard Brooks.
Now you're fleeing, so somehow that's a threat to me and I need to kill you for it is just fucking beyond me. But that's what people just have accepted. Like, fuck you, that is not a death sentence.
You gonna come and tell me it's a few bad apples? It's a whole damn orchard, man.
The cities with the highest police budgets in America also have some of the highest crime rates. I wonder why that is.
They don't need any more fucking money. They're militarized as fuck already. What good is that helping the community?
We are the ones that are gonna get murdered more. We're the ones that are gonna end up in jails more.
I think we need to be done with this shit. It's such bullshit. We aren't gonna be able to do anything if everyone stays asleep. That's what pisses me off so much.
You know what that means when somebody says that? That means to them, they don't care about black lives. They're telling you directly to your face, oh, it's just a few bad apples. I need to see more black people being killed before I give a shit. That's what they're saying. Because the value of a black man or a black person in America does not register with them. You know, 1 out of every 1,000 black men in America gets killed by police.
And I posed this question: conservatives have not received an answer yet. I know you guys see my tweets. I asked you guys if you really believe in gun rights, why is it justified for a cop to shoot someone just because they have a gun? Over and over again, they use the fact that, oh, he had a gun, so we will justify in shooting him. So my question to the right wing, this is to show how you guys are hypocrites on this issue: do you believe in gun rights or not? Because if you believe in gun rights, that is not a justification for them to shoot them.
After all the protests, all the outcry, they haven't learned a thing. The pigs, the politicians didn't get the message. So you got to turn up the heat.
Abby, your thoughts?
I mean, it's very true. And it's a problem that we see in a lot of communities. I think that there was a point there that Jesse brought up about someone running away, about someone fleeing. And if someone is running away from the police, they are no longer considered to be a threat. And I think that's important for people to understand. They're not running towards the cops, they're running away from them. And in reference to police funding, same thing. I agree with what Afeni said, is that the cities, some of the cities that have the largest police budgets have high crime rates. So you have to ask yourself, what is really happening there? I mean, I know Nick and I have talked about this before, that police solve 0.02% of crime. Yeah. So what are police officers doing with all that time that they have throughout the day? A lot of times I've seen them targeting people and harassing people in Black neighborhoods, particularly, like, I'm speaking of Baltimore because that's where my family is from. So I've seen police officers come into the inner city. A lot of times they don't live in the neighborhood. They don't know the people. They don't know the community, and they come in there harassing people. And mainly part of it is because they have quotas that they're supposed to reach. There was a gentleman, he's a former police officer. He was on Joe Rogan's show. I can never remember this guy's name. I think it's Michael something.
Yeah.
But
the guy who does like community police like boards, right? Used to.
Yeah. Yes. Michael revealed that when he was a Baltimore police officer, that they used to tell them certain like blocks to patrol and to come back with something. And the gentleman who was filming him for the documentary said, but one would think that you would need to actually commit a crime to charge someone with the crime and to bring them in. And he said, that's what you would think, but that's not necessarily true. So he talked about how police officers were planting drugs on people, planting weapons on people. Baltimore police are one of the most corrupt police forces in the United States. So he talked about that, you know, and I think that people really need to understand that when I say defund the police, what you have to know is that they only solve 0.02% of crime. So defunding them that's not really going to change that. We've been giving them more and more money for years, and they're still not really solving more crimes. So people have to make that connection.
Well, and I mean, Afeni talked about DC being one of the most policed things. Collin being from DC can attest. Definitely still crime in one of the highest policed, you know, areas of the country that the squad votes to put more in. So, you know,
and something that I think about a lot, and Savvy, I think you brought this up in a stream maybe a few weeks ago. It's the idea of like, and I'm going to be very careful about what I say, because there are obviously a lot of cultural issues that become like the hot topics right now that, you know, not to say that they shouldn't get any attention, they do, but I just feel a certain way that the people who are making the lead on these issues and kind of talking about it and almost kind of canceling people if they do certain actions towards, you know, discrimination against certain groups, it's almost kind of like taking precedence over our issue, Black people issues, especially regarding the police. You know, I think about George Floyd, and I was in the midst of it back in 2020, and I witnessed, you know, the abuse that the cops were putting towards the protesters firsthand. Like, and the fact that now, like, we still haven't gotten any justice for George Floyd. We still haven't gotten any, you know, legislation to protect Black people from the police after George Floyd. And especially with the bigger channels, they've kind of moved on, you know. But as Savvy says, you know, like for me, you know, like, yeah, like Biden is not necessarily an issue that I have to deal with every day. I have to deal with the cops. And I think I shared the story before, like this is actually in Boston when I lived there. I was waiting at the subway getting home and a cop presses up on me because apparently I quote unquote fit the description of a robbery that happened within, I think, a block or so away. And I remember being like, I don't know what he's going to do to, and he was a lot bigger. He had to be about 6'5", white cop. And he was kind of coming at me. It's like, where were you? And like, I literally feared for my life. And if it wasn't for a drunk white woman across the other platform who basically was saying, you know, he's been here for the last however long, he's been not like, he's no, like he had nothing to do with that. You know, I don't know what that cop would have done. But I remember, you know, as soon as the train hit the platform, I got on and I basically ran home in tears. And I had never had an issue with the cops before prior to that, but that's something I do think about all the time. And that's something that I'm more wary of in terms of, you know, I'm afraid that can happen to me again, essentially, because of my skin color. And the fact that people are not taking, not everybody, but certain people don't take that issue seriously enough, especially where we're kind of making these statements of defunding the police, like we're looking for abolition, then, you know, the fact that people are not talking about it or are just kind of dismissing it is very upsetting. But yet
Speaking
you
of-
want us to kind of follow up with the issues that you care about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking
This is
of
how it always
abolition,
works.
do either of you know where police forces originate from? Because many of you talked about it. Go ahead.
I've said from what I've researched, slave patrols.
Mhm.
But when I talked about this with Adolph Reed, he told me that's actually not true. That's a myth. And I was like, no.
Yeah,
Not
I'm
what for
gonna
my
go
bread.
with very possibly maybe. But anyway, here's another video to enlighten people. Roll the tape.
I don't hear anything.
Violently assaulting a woman. That's a 300-pound muscled up steroided fucking thumb-dicked cocksucker violently assaulting a woman.
All of them, the political class, the oligarchs, the cops, the judiciary, they are begging you to burn this bitch down.
That guy, that's him. And he's got a torture collar on his dog. This guy's fucking fucked up, and he's a cop. This guy's fucked up, and he's a cop.
Come on, bro. Come on. Let's be real about here, okay?
Do they have a psychological exam? Yes. And if you're fucked up, they let you in. By the way, if you're too smart or show compassion, they get rid of you. They like obedient maniacs who are hopped up on steroids who like to torture people. That's who fucking cops are.
It's time to wake up. Come on, get up.
Like the topic today, which is American policing and, you know, their roots and origins in slave patrol, slave catching. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So
after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery except as a punishment for a crime.
The South immediately moves to exploit this loophole by passing a series of crime bills known as Black Codes.
Some of the first police forces in the South were created to control enslaved Black people. They would come to be known as slave patrols.
All white people, including white children, were expected to enforce so-called slave codes.
And you want me to watch my tone? Motherfucker, I can't be angry enough. I'm not angry enough, nowhere near angry enough.
it's fighting against slavery or fighting against slave catching. Then it's to protect property. Then it's to squash workers' movement. They're literally talking about that. It's those three things that the invention or what's interwoven into the DNA of the police from its inception.
You enslaving and oppressing people for hundreds of fucking years, and then you wonder why they're angry?
Bro, we imprison 1/4 of the world's prison population. The American police killed 3 people per day. Name it. We're the other country that has civil asset forfeiture. redlining, broken windows policing.
This practice of convict leasing earned enormous revenues for the states who lent out their prisoners, and huge profits for the companies using this prison labor.
If you're siding with the cops, brutalizing people, you're a bootlicker.
Slavery was not outlawed, bro. You tell me this doesn't look just like slavery? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Is that what you're trying to look at? I mean, just look at this. Like, all you did was say slavery's over, and then you round up all the same slaves, put them in prison, and then rent them out to people to do the same work.
Yeah, you damn fucking right I'm angry. I'm not angry enough, motherfucker. The question isn't why am I angry and why am I cussing. The question is why the fuck are you not angry? Where is your empathy? Where is your fucking brain cells? Where is your common decency? Where's your compassion? What is wrong with you that you are not angry? How could you look at this shit and not be angry?
Come on, bro. Come on. Let's be real about here, okay?
Go beat your wives more, because that's what cops do. Oh, by the way, the profession with the most wives beaters? Cops, of course!
So, go ahead and Google the bonus army after World War I.
I need respect. I want you to respect us. It's not how the people want it, but that's how I want it. And I'm a cop.
That's my money. That's your money. Whoever the fuck pays taxes, right? I want to see where my money goes, and I want it to go into my community around me so I can see what's going on. I don't want it to go to the police.
You cannot reform this, okay? Do you understand that? These people are trigger happy, they're violent, they're racist. Wake up, asshole!
I'm a cop!
Yep. I mean, yep. It's why one of the biggest prisons in Louisiana is still a plantation. Like, anyway. Thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I was gonna say, for people who are not aware, a lot of the guys I know, particularly that went to my high school, a lot of the guys that end up becoming police officers are guys who peaked in high school. And then it's like after high school, they're like, they want to be like bullies and they want to have some type of power that they no longer have because they don't have that power from when they were in high school. And so they decide to be a cop. So a lot of times it's people who are already assholes who become police officers. And then they become even worse because now they have a gun and they have a badge. And so people have to understand that. Now, it's not all of them, but there are some of them that do that. And they feed off of that power. And I think that's important for people to understand. When I look at the officers that did the chokehold on Eric Garner, one of the police officers in particular, the one, I don't know his name, but the one that looked at the camera, he was such a jerk. That guy in particular, I was like, that guy reminds me of someone who probably peaked in high school and now decided to get a gun and a badge and thinks he's one of the most powerful people. And they are protected. They're very much protected. They're protected by the union. They're protected by the governor. They're protected by the mayors. For people who are not aware, the mayor does have the ability to remove police officers, to remove police chiefs. And so I'll give an example here in Boston. Many people may not know this, but just a couple of years ago, the former police chief of Boston, it was a big to-do here because he was the first Black police chief in Boston. So it was all over the news. He was assigned that position. When it was announced that Marty Walsh was going to go to DC to work for Joe Biden under that position, he announced that he was considering running for mayor of Boston. And then after that announcement, it was revealed that he had also been brought up on domestic abuse allegations from his wife. And nothing was done because he was a police officer. Like sick stories, like to the point where even he was sleeping with a gun under his pillow. Needless to say, he decided not to run for mayor. That was the police chief.
Yep. Well, the one person we didn't get to see in those videos a lot from RBN is Rome. I think we should add some of him in here. I don't know what do you guys think? I think I'm down. Yay.
Watch
is to fund the police.
We'll see.
Fund them.
Yeah, let's do this. Pause and click.
The answer
play.
is not to defund the police.
Watch
is to fund the police.
We'll see. Kamala and Nancy stand up and they're Democrats, and then you got Republicans right here standing up and clapping. One
I know that lady.
corporate party.
You want to hear this? This is after the cops had run over people.
So we have a group of people blocking traffic on Albany and Dean Street. They're refusing to let the orange go eastbound on Dean Street and Albany. So we're stuck here. Run them over. Shut the motherfucker up. Don't put that over yet.
Like, what the fuck?
Take a quick look at this segment, because there's something he shows here that I don't think a lot of people have been paying attention to.
People are listening because citizens have police scanners and they can hear what you really think, dummy. Hey, you fucking depraved animal. People are going to know we're depraved animals now. Don't put that out over the air. Don't put that out over the air. We're depraved animals. You know that, right?
Step out of the car. Step out of the car.
See how much money they spend on cops? Look at it. It keeps going up and up and up. From Obama. From Obama. Look at all that money.
I'll say it once and I'll say it again. Defund the police on the road to abolishing them.
We see the citizens we're supposed to be serving as the enemy because that's how we're trained. And half of us are hopped up on steroids. We got roid rage. The other half of us are just depraved white supremacists and wife beaters.
Right, nobody's gonna question these people. So they feel like they can go around our community and do whatever the fuck they want to us, bro.
So 2017, Barack Obama, he increased funding by $1.07 billion.
Like, what the fuck?
You know, people don't understand what reduces crime.
Since when? Since when has the police ever stopped crime?
What reduces crime is healthcare, jobs, good economy, good schools. That's what actually reduces crime. More cops just increases our incarcerated population.
We are the most propagandized country. Our country is so propagandized. We literally imprison 1/4 of the world's prison population, but we somehow convince people we are the land of the free. How the hell did they do that?
Like, what the fuck?
2018, Trump increased funding by $1.14 billion.
Like, what the fuck?
The government convinced white people through propaganda that the black people are the criminal, and then white people are fine with all the brutality. They're fine with the police state being funded. They're fine with all of that stuff.
2019 increased funding by $1.17 billion.
If you just complied, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. Did you know that stop and frisk, which basically a lot of this was, only led to 1% of the people being stopped and frisked to being arrested? That means 99% of the time, every single person that was stopped and frisked was innocent.
Like, what the fuck?
2020 increased funding by $1.23 billion.
Like, what the fuck? What world are we living in?
The world you created, mouth-breathing fucking maniac. What world are we living in? The world you created. Out of control terrorists like you fucking...
That damn blue line is thin for a reason. It can be snapped. With logic, man.
2021 increased funding by $1.32 billion.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, isn't the point of policing public safety? So, do you guys realize that we spend 3 times more on the NYPD than North Korea does on their military budget? and you guys don't feel safe?
And they don't feel safe.
How much money do the police need to have for you to feel safe at home?
And then we go right here to Joe Biden, increased funding, $1.28 billion.
What the fuck?
And the reason why I wanted to show you this is because it goes to show you that at the end of the day, both Democrats and Republicans support the police state.
That's what this is. You won't respect my authority. Treat me with respect.
These motherfuckers are serial killers.
They take care of their own.
Some of these police officers have more than 5 fucking bodies. 5 bodies on their fucking belt. That's a real killer. What the fuck?
If you're a populist, if you're for the working class people, the police state is our #1 enemy. They steal more resources from us via the civil asset forfeiture than criminals do. Do you guys know that?
People are angry. People are ready to rise up. And I honestly believe that is why They want to give the police more money because they know what's coming. He wants to make it so that, as much as he likes to tout support for what happened with George Floyd, he wants to make it clear he's going to be sure that nothing like that will ever happen again.
I love Joe's videos. I can't say that enough. Dude does real good work. So, but also JB getting angry in there. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like when JB gets upset. You know, he goes off when he goes off, and it's great. So,
And can I say something? Because there are certain people in the space that are like, "Oh, why are you so angry?" You know, in reference to us. You know, and it's kind of like, first of all, I'm kind of like, well, why aren't you? The fact that you're not as angry, like I have to kind of question where you're coming from. In a sense, that's kind of a privileged take to say that, you know, especially to Black people, you know, like that you have to be so angry. This is the shit that we have to deal with, like on a daily basis. So it just kind of shows the class and then the race divide in terms of how people view the police. Like if you're far removed from the problem, or if you're white or another race where you don't necessarily have to deal with it, you don't have to think about that. But, you know, as I said, you know, like this is something that we, and especially if you're Black and growing up like in the hood, you have to deal with this every single day. And so on top of other stuff, you know, that we have to deal with just doing living life in America, you know, we have cause to be angry. And this is one of the reasons why. And as I said, it angers me that when people, you know, when we talk about these issues to people, that people just kind of dismiss, oh, you know, it's not a big deal, you know, like George Floyd, that's going to happen like one day, you know, whatever. Don't worry about it. But then when it comes to the issues that they care about, then they expect us to be on board to kind of promote their issues. And so I basically say to, you know, our community, because I think our community is pretty much more in the know. So this is just more for anybody else. Like, if you truly are a leftist and you care about Black people, especially the ones that you are concerned about, you know, the issues that we talk about, policing, reparations, economics, listen to us. Because, you know, as, you know, the Democrats say, they depend on our vote, you know? And unfortunately, we are not going to have those issues even brought up, you know, in federal government. But with the right people, and especially if you're non-white, of color, you know, you have a better chance to help us be allies in kind of elevating a lot of these issues. So if you care about us, as you say you do, then you stand up for us when we talk to you about these issues that really have undermined our community in this country for the last 400 years, and you help to elevate those issues. Because if you don't, that just shows us where your heart is at, and you're not really in it to promote, you know, these progressive issues that, especially for Black people, are of concern to us. So,
well, that's, yeah, I was going to say that was one of the same criticisms about the Bernie Sanders movement that some people had, that it seemed like, yes, all of those policies would help working class and poor people, right? So it would help Black people too. But when it came to issues that were specifically about the Black community, Bernie Sanders' campaign was against it.
Yeah.
And that did turn off some Black people, some Black voters. That was a turnoff, you know? So there were some things to me that I felt like was just a no-brainer. You know, it's okay for Bernie Sanders to sign on for legislation to give added reparations to Jewish people in the United States. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is when Bernie Sanders says he does not agree with reparations for African Americans in this country.
With the
That was a big, that's a problem.
with
That's
the
a problem.
excuse that it will never pass. And I'm like,
But it's not even just that, because
Right.
I talked to Cornel West about this as well, and I asked him what was the deal with that, and Cornel West said yeah, he doesn't agree with that. So it's not just about that it won't pass. I think it's more so about the fact that it's for Black people. You see, the whole thing of this goes back into the Bernie Sanders movement, is that Bernie Sanders truly believed that if you just fix the economic issue, then everything else will fall into place. That's true to a certain extent. But the problem that you're still going to run into is that even if you get the money, you fix the economic issue, at the end of the day, if you're Black, you're still Black. You still have to deal with racism. You still have to deal with these systemic racial issues that we have in this country. You have to deal with the education system, which also is inherently racist in this country. It's very segregated. Property taxes pay for public schools. That's a big mistake. That is also aligned with racism as well, because obviously people in the low income neighborhoods, which most of the time are Black neighborhoods, are not going to have these schools that are well resourced and that are well funded. So that is the big piece that is missing. So when people stop talking about a policing issue after George Floyd, I noticed that there were very few commentators that are still covering policing stories. Many of them after George Floyd protests, they talked about that a lot because it was trending, it was global news. But then after that, all these other incidents, they don't even cover. There was no story about Amir Locke. They didn't touch that. How many people talked about Jalen McMillan, the 15-year-old Black boy who was shot in the head with his hands up? They're not covering those stories because it does not pertain to them and their communities. Now, that's not everyone. Some people, like Jimmy, still talks about policing, but some people clearly just walked away, because the thing is, if they're not affected, they don't really want to deal with it. Same thing with reparations. If it's not really for them, they don't really want to talk about it. But we were expected to get on board with the issues that benefit them.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, getting into fights with Black people regarding Bernie Sanders back in 2020 for that issue. They didn't trust him. I had prominent, Black, especially one in particular, I forgot her name right now, got into a fight with her. Basically she didn't trust Bernie. And now in hindsight, I'm like, I should have listened to you, because there was a lot of, they were right to kind of not trust Bernie. And obviously, I definitely have grown in that idea now, especially given the lexical work that he has done now since. But, I think it does stand to talk about the idea of, I think that just helps our case, being Black commentators, that we need to talk about our stories more from our perspective. Yeah. So, shout out to you, Sabby, for doing the work and kind of leading me in that as well, doing this for not as long as you have. But I think at the same time, as a way to kind of educate people about the reality of what it is to mean living Black, in America, and how there are things that are different for us, even on the left, that people need to understand, and not sympathize. We don't need your pity, but to take that understanding and do something with it. And as I said before, if you're choosing to ignore what we're saying to you, then I can't really truly call you an ally. So I think just moving forward, that's something I think we have to be cautious of, but also just as a call to people who, are kind of in our space, listen to us, that we are imploring you to stand for us in these issues. Because as I said, as me as a Black man, you as a Black woman, we're not going to get the kind of traction that if you're non-Black, if you're talking about these issues and there's enough of you, it's going to get attention. So,
Speaking of listening to others, leads us to our next story, Collin. You ready?
Yeah, so this is one of the rare times that Twitter actually works. What I mean by that. So, I found this story on Twitter, I think over the weekend, and And those of you who know me well, you know that I've lived in Africa for a bit, and I try and visit every year in East Africa. I love the region, I love the people, and part of why I had my personal channel is to highlight, issues that are based in Africa, because often, especially in the world space, are often ignored. But this was from Popular Resistance / Back Agenda Report. So this was an interview with Dr. Fred Lemembe, who is president of the Socialist Party of Zambia. So he was recently a guest, and he did this interview with Sean Blackman and Jacqueline Lukeman regarding Ukraine. And I thought it was very interesting in what he was saying, because obviously, Africa, as many probably know, Africa has a slightly different take on Ukraine versus what the West is telling us of how we should feel about Ukraine and Russia in general. So, I'm actually going to read this interview. And then.
Yep. There you go.
Here we go.
One more.
All right.
Perfect.
So I may not read all of it, but at least enough of it that we get at least the idea of what Dr. Memembe was saying in
Let's see if I can zoom close enough, maybe.
Yeah, if you can zoom out a bit. I can read if you can zoom out a little bit more.
Yeah.
There we go. I can read that, actually. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. And Doctor, of course, we've been following on the show very closely the rapidly escalating war in Ukraine, this proxy war between us and NATO forces in Russia. And we've been keeping a close eye on the international response to this war, as you know, the US and the West, its allies and junior partners, to try to present this image as if, the whole international community is sort of siding with them in condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February of this year. But I feel like once you take a closer look at how some of these opinions and perspectives from different governments are really playing out, I think the picture is a bit more complicated. Now, back in March, in the United Nations, there was a debate over a resolution fundamentally to condemn Moscow for its invasion of Ukraine. And within that vote, 35 countries abstained from it, including 17 member states of the African Union. And there have been also been leaders like Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa that have not necessarily jumped on the Western bandwagon with this as well. And so we wanted to bring you in, we want to bring you to discuss this, because from your perspective, obviously, you are in Zambia, a country in Southern Africa, and I'm just wondering why you think we've seen these kinds of responses from some of these different African governments towards the war in Ukraine. And what do you think it says about the reality of geopolitics right now? So here's his response. First, let me say it is very important to understand that no war is good. It is impossible not to be moved by the outrageousness of warfare. They grow some fears of civilians who are trapped between choices that are not their own, but was made very complicated historical processes that appear to be simple. The war in Ukraine is not merely about NATO or about ethnicity. It is about many things. Every war must end at some point, and the diplomats must restart that must come in. Africa and the Russian people share a history of struggle. When the African people were fighting for their independence, for their liberation, those who are condemning Russia today, we are not with them then. They were on the other side. They never took our side. Not that our side was wrong. Our side was right. But they never took our side. They took the side of the colonialists. They took the side of apartheid. They took the side of racist superiority against the forces of liberation, African liberation. We'll never forget that. They want us to forget that, but it's not easy to forget that, because it's not very long ago, Zimbabwe only became independent in 1980. Zambia only became independent in 1990. This was not very long ago in terms of historical processes. We know who stood with the apartheid regime in South Africa. We know who stood with the racist regime in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. We know who sided with the colonialists in Angola, in Mozambique, in the Cape Verde. We know all these things. So the African people have a sense of history as well. It's not possible for Africans to condemn Russia, given where we're coming from together. And the Russian war is a complicated process. And let's not be simplistic about it. Let's understand where this process is coming from. Since 1990, there's been an attempt to expand the NATO forces in Eastern Europe up to Russia. There was some cooperation initially, even from Russia itself under Boris Yeltsin. There was some engagement, but all of that has changed. And it's important to understand that long history, and the Africans understand that. We are able to analyze things for ourselves. We're able to see things for ourselves. We're able to come to our own conclusions. And we understand the decisions and actions of our enemies, and also the decisions and actions of our friends. We're even able to understand the mistakes of our friends and to separate them or single them out to identify them from the actions and decisions of our enemies. We know who our friends are. The Russian people have stood on our side. Russia has never had colonies in Africa. That must be understood. Despite helping to liberate us, Russia has never taken control of any African country. Russia has never colonized any country that they helped to liberate. Russia has not exploited an African country. We do not know of any country in Africa that can claim it was a colony of Russia, claim that it has been exploited and humiliated by Russia. This history is very clear to us, and this is not easy for us to be swayed by propaganda against Russia. So actually, there's some parts there that I actually do want to go back to, but for time, I will read it through, and then I'll share my thoughts after that. We don't want the war in Ukraine to continue as Africans. War is bad. War is not good for the poor. War is not good for the workers. War is in itself a crime. War produces crimes. Peace must always be a priority. We Africans want the war in Ukraine to end, but that won't end without taking into account the security concerns of Russia, and indeed the security concerns of Ukraine itself, and even the security concerns of Europe itself. It shouldn't be the security of one section or one region or one country. The security of all must be considered. The security of Ukraine must be considered. The security of Russia must be considered, and indeed the security of Europe. Emphasizing on just one side of the equation, it won't work. You cannot have security for Europe. You cannot have security for Ukraine without taking into account the security concerns of Russia. Similarly, you cannot have the security concerns of Russia addressed without taking into account the security concerns of Ukraine, the security concerns of Europe. We all need security. As we pursue our own security interests, we must also take into account the security concerns of others. This is what is lacking in the issue of Ukraine. Russia has legitimate security concerns, and they didn't just walk into Ukraine. From 2004, they have been actively pursuing these issues. But instead of addressing them, the opposite has happened. NATO has been expanding its lines. NATO has been trying to consolidate its positions in Eastern Europe up to the Russian border. What did you expect Russia to do? Sit idle and watch? Its security concerns are not being addressed? Is security being violated? Is security being threatened? Would the US or Europe accept that situation? Who in the world would accept that to happen? So that Jacqueline comments, you know, what you just said, that brief encapsulation of the history of solidarity really that the Russian people and that the Russian government has had with the African liberation struggles over decades is so important. I think to this conversation, because I think in some ways, we in the United States, even though we who are Pan-Africanists understand and know a bit of that history, most people do not, so most people don't understand and don't know. They're ignorant of the struggle against colonialism on the African continent. So they're ignorant of the abuses, and they're ignorant of their relationship with Russia and the continent. And in that context, do you think that it's just the ignorance of this relationship that you just explained that makes it difficult for us in the United States to understand why African nations are refusing to condemn Russia, and also why we have difficult time pulling back from literally cheering this war to continue in order to quote unquote support Ukraine, as our government tells us, without any consideration for the lives of the people who are caught in the middle of this war, as you said, who did not choose it and who did not ask for it, most of whom are working class and poor people on the continent of Africa. So Dr. Mbembe continues, sometimes it's not the issue of ignorance, sometimes it's the issue of arrogance, and the problem sometimes even racist attitudes. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. What's good for America is also good for others. America would not tolerate what it wants Russia to tolerate on its borders. If Russia was to move into Mexico today or into Canada, and they do what the Americans and the Europeans are trying to do in Ukraine, I don't think they would tolerate that. We have the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba is 90 miles away from Florida. But when the Soviet Union placed its missiles there, there was a big crisis which had to be resolved amicably. Why should Russia feel secure? With Ukraine becoming a NATO member and placing missiles on its border, there are issues that need to be guaranteed. What we need is adherence to the Minsk agreements. What is,
Yes.
What is needed is security guarantees for Russia and Ukraine, which would also require Europe to develop an independent relationship with Russia that is not shaped by US interests. There will also have to be a reversal of Ukraine's ultra-nationalist laws, and they return it to a much more plural national compact. If in some sense negotiations and agreements regarding these essential matters do not materialize, it is likely that the dangerous weapons will face each other across the divides, and additional countries may be drawn into this conflict with a potential to spiral out of control. We do not want this conflict to get out of control. There is a need for negotiations to end this war, and the negotiations, in our view, center around these three principal issues. They're returning to the Minsk agreements, security guarantees for Russia and Ukraine, reversal of ultra-traditionalist laws. This is not demanding too much. Of course, these are not simple issues, but there are issues that need to be addressed. For sure. And last question, Dr. Mbembe, is, we're in a time from the standpoint of a US imperialism as it sees itself engaging in great power conflict, both with Russia and China, and the African continent seems like is sort of poised to become a real battlefield for this new Cold War. And so for the African continent, for all its linguistic and cultural and ethnic and geographic diversity, how do you see sort of the role of the continent in the coming period as we continue to see efforts, to bring about a world order that isn't controlled from Washington? For our diversity, for the difference among us, one thing that we all need is peace. We need peace to develop. We need peace to move people out of poverty. We don't want to be drawn into any Cold War or any other war. We don't want war. We have had enough. We've been humiliated for over 600 years. We were hunted as slaves, traded as slaves. We were colonized. We moved from classical colonization, neo-colonialism, all these humiliating things. We've had enough of our torture. We have had enough crucifixion. It's time for Africa to also have its resurrection. And that resurrection cannot come under a Cold War. That is why our position is of non-alignment. We have the right to pursue our own interests, while others also have the right to pursue their own interests. But one thing that is in common is that we need a peaceful world. All our people need a peaceful world. The Americans need to live in peace. The Europeans need to live in peace. The Africans need peace. The Russians need peace. All need peace. Everything that threatens peace threatens all of us. It threatens our peaceful existence here, and it also threatens our progress. War is destructive. It destroys wealth. It destroys production, increases poverty, and increases despair. It brings suffering. It brings pain. We don't need this. We have had enough. We want to develop and developing peace, and we don't want to be shackled to wars that are not ours. There are not wars that are ours or benefit us, but we are there to try and offer solutions because every war, no matter how small it is, it has got ripple effects. It affects not only the primary people involved in it, but there are also secondary implications. We don't want war. So I have some thoughts I'll go back to, but Sabi and Reef, do you have any thoughts? That was a lot, but I think he makes it very clear about, at least in Zambia, where he stands on this war in Ukraine.
That's right. I was just gonna say, it's not surprising to me, and I'm glad that he mentioned that Russia never colonized in Africa, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of that, and that would explain, the fact that Africa said that they wanted to remain neutral in reference to this conflict. I felt like that was the right way to go. And of course, they'd have received pressure from other countries, other European countries, to not remain neutral and to take the side of Ukraine. But the thing is that they remember their history, they remember their experiences that they've had with Russia. And so I don't blame them for just wanting to stay out of it. But I agree, same thing, like war is not good for anybody, except for the people who are part of the weapon manufacturer business.
Yeah.
Like it's good for them.
Right.
profitable for them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it mentioned the treatment of like black people in Ukraine, I think, in that story, didn't
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Which no one's talking about.
No.
No one has talked about. And
Garland Nixon, I know, talked about it, and he's off Twitter, so he can get let back on there. That would be nice.
Yeah, we talked about how the African students were treated in Ukraine when this first started, and they wouldn't let them get on the trains. We talked about that at RBN. But no, you're right. A lot of people that have discussed this have left that piece out. And I talked about the message that came from the Peace Corps, where they were warning Black Americans not to go over there to volunteer to help, because this is what you are going to have to deal with if you come over here. And this is how they view Black people in Ukraine. And it was really interesting to me that same thing, like what Collin was saying, most people who have covered this conflict have not brought this up about the way that they've been treating Black people in Ukraine.
Well, I mean, not just you. Omali Yeshitela, raided by the FBI because he was supposedly colluding with Russians. The African the leader of the African People's Socialist Party, like colluding with Russians. They send drones into his house. How old is he? Like, I want to say he's in like 60s, 70s, right? Like, he's been at it for a while. He told me after an interview that, like, the first thing he thought of was Fred Hampton. Like, and it's like, I didn't need to ask any more than that. I knew exactly what he meant, you know? Like, so, I mean, they shot through walls to get that guy. So, anyway, you got more, Collin?
Well, that's the article, but there are a couple of things I said I wanted to mention. So just going back to it, Dr. Mbembe kind of mentions that Russia has never colonized any country that they helped to liberate, you know? The way I kind of looked at that, and especially given where in my work and my visits in East Africa, this in a lot of ways also kind of, I'm not sure if he was even thinking this, but to me, this also kind of reminds me of what China is also doing in Africa, you know? And I know I've kind of mentioned this, you know, online. I know I kind of mentioned this to you, Reef. And I know that there is kind of like a pro-China, like, stance, especially on the left, in terms of like, oh, China's going in and helping the Africans with infrastructure and all of that. But I want to caution people for having been on the ground and talking to actual, like, my friends who are actually seeing what's happening. Many of them are not necessarily appreciative of what China is doing. Because again, Dr. Mbembe is socialist. So the idea that he's thinking about is, and I would assume he kind of alluded to it in this, in his interview, is for Africans to seize the means of production. And my question is, how is China doing that? Are they allowing Africans to liberate using their own materials to help liberate themselves? And the question, and the answer is, depending where you are and depending on your person that you're talking to may be, but from what I see, the answer is probably no, because China's coming in and giving them, you know, like the infrastructure. But for what I understand, especially from people that I've talked to, often, especially with a lot of these infrastructure projects, it's the Chinese who is supervising the Africans there. And often than not, the Africans are being mistreated from what they tell me, you know? And then at the end of the day, does that money go back into those countries that this infrastructure is benefiting to help? Not necessarily. A lot of that money is going back to China. So I want people, and I haven't really said this a lot because I know from me, a lot of it, my experience with this is very anecdotal. So I don't want to necessarily come in and kind of talk about it without researching it a little bit more and having some facts behind, you know, what I'm saying. But that being said, you know, I do think we need to kind of take caution to the wind, especially if you haven't been to Africa before, that pro-China stances that certain people make may not be necessarily reflective of the Africans who are living and are dealing with the conditions. And not to say it's bad, every country is different, so I can't speak for all of them. But I know for at least in Uganda, where I spent significant amount of time, at least from the people that I talked to there, that is the case in certain situations. So that being said, Savvy, as you said, you are going to leave us now. So before you go, is there anything that you want to plug or anything that you want people to be mindful of, before you go?
And
Absolutely.
closing thoughts on whatever you want, probably.
So last word for you.
Yeah.
Sure. So we've been talking a lot about the railroad workers. Tomorrow night, I actually do have one railroad worker confirmed that's coming on. There may be another as well. So I'm going to get to hear from them about how all this went down and what they really want. And hopefully we can try to motivate them in some way, shape, or form to push back. Maybe if it's a wildcat strike or whatever they can do. And we'll find out tomorrow, like if they're set up to do a strike, if they need to, if they can, like legally and all those sorts of things. But I'll finally get a chance to talk to them tomorrow. So that's what I have coming up.
Okay.
Cool.
And I think most of us know where you are, but just in case you don't, your Twitter and your YouTube channel is listed in the description. So those of you who are here and new, please sub to Sabby. Please, follow her on Twitter. And thank you so much for joining us, even though it was short, but it just means we'll have you on again for a hopefully longer period next time.
Yep.
So
alrighty.
Appreciate you, Sabby. Thank you.
Send
Thanks,
those workers
guys.
over here when you're done. Love you.
We'll do so.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. No, I should have done that before. Everyone gets to see infinitum. Yay, infinity. Studio mode. And then I have to look for this one zoom. This, and then do that. And look, now it's fixed. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad we at least got through those two stories, so that was good. Stick around. We've got two more if people are wanting to do that. They should be fairly short, so let's get out of studio mode, shall we? But yeah, good stuff. So yeah, and I think we have ways to support that same group of railroad workers, right? Didn't you put that in description? I think.
Yeah, so for those of you know, like the Railroad Workers United, they are raising money as mutual aid. So their link is also in the description as well, if you want to support them. And then also kind of plugging myself a little bit, I'm still raising money for my teacher advocacy group in Power Ed. So like I said, Jesus, last week, this week it's just been, oof. We are accepting donations through the remainder of December.
Nice.
So I have to check to see how much we raised, but I think we've raised as an organization about half of what we're looking for.
Nice.
I'll check later. And then personally, I'm looking to raise at least $300. So far, I have 45. So if you are interested in helping me in doing the work, and actually I might be doing a lot more, as I shared with Reef and Indy last night, I might possibly have a slight promotion within the organization, that will mean doing more work, and especially right now doing a lot more activism here. So definitely please donate, because a lot of that money is wanting to help. Because right now for me, this is volunteer work. I do this out of the kindness of my heart. But the job that my boss essentially is looking for me to do, he's hoping to give me a stipend to do the extra work. So that money will help me, to do the work that, we say we want people to do, but I think especially in this organization too. So yeah.
Lovely savvy people, while you're still here before you leave, because your goddess is gone.
Yes.
Hit that
leave.
sub button. Hit that sub button before you do.
Yes. I think just looking, we got quite a few subs I think within the last few hours. So
We're almost monetized. All we need is the
Yeah.
sub count.
So
Literally it.
so we're pushing for 900 subs by the weekend. And then, obviously we just need that last push in order to get to that 1,000. So
Literally
our goal is to hit
100 subs
1,000.
for the most part, since I'm looking right now. We're at 880, 84. So,
right now.
you
So we need
know.
116 left. So
Yeah.
please share.
And
share
you
with
might
your
have gotten
friends.
unsubbed. You know?
Yeah.
It happens.
Please check that too.
Hit that
Please
button.
check that too. So
But, you might think we're insane, which, but we are in some ways.
Josh, friend to the network, is here. Nice to see you, Josh.
What's up, Josh? I
Glad
see
to
a
see you.
Bortus here.
And he said he had to resub for the 4th time. So yeah,
Yep.
please, because YouTube be doing some mess, please check and make sure you're subbed. And at least at minimum, when we're going live, especially tonight, where we're streaming a little earlier than normal, but we wanted to be as accommodating to Savvy as possible for gracing us with her presence, even though for a short
Yep.
time. But yeah, so please subscribe. If you haven't, if you're new, welcome. If you're
Amazing
not
that-
new, please share with your friends and tell them to subscribe to.
Imagine you would tell your child self that an hour was a short period of time. You're like, no, an hour is long. I don't like it. It's
No,
long.
I have a few children that I know that will tell you.
Like those shows short, especially for nap time. Depends on what it is, I guess, right?
Well, it depends on what it is. It usually when it's around playtime and around the things that they want to do, then it's short.
Yeah. Well,
But
I brought a story with us this week for the New Yorkers in chat. Hopefully you don't appear. Oh, God. Let's do this. I know. It's going to look weird for a second. This is the problem with OBS. And, we fix things quickly, though. But, so, this guy, right?
That's Eric Adams.
Mayor Eric Adams. So, New York City advocates fear more police violence, homeless criminalization amid forced hospitalizations. I'll read that again. Forced hospitalizations. New York City Mayor Eric Adams issued a directive this week that puts police at the center of renewed efforts to remove people exhibiting signs of mental illness from public spaces. So, yeah. So this is, I think I got this from SheerPost, but this is Elizabeth Wheel Greenberg over from The Appeal. So she wants to point out that advocates are raising alarm over New York City Mayor Eric Adams' new directive targeting people with perceived signs of mental illness for removal and forced hospitalization. While Adams has said the policy is intended to help the city's poorest and most vulnerable residents, community groups say the true intent is to disappear homeless people from the city streets and subways. They argue the new standards will only result in further criminalization and police violence against the unhoused population. So, this is from another article, which was at, where's this one from? Links are in the description below for both, by the way, and for
Truth
all the
Out?
articles we do. Yes, Truth Out.
Right?
So on November 29th, New York City Mayor Eric Adams announced his plan to involuntarily commit large numbers of the city's homeless to mental hospitals. The new policy also expands the use of Kendra's Law. Have you heard of this law, Collin? At all?
I didn't know about it until you told me about it yesterday. But for those who do not know, share.
Yeah. Hold on. So, Kendra's Law, which allows for court-ordered outpatient treatment, this makes it easier to force unhoused people who aren't exiled to a hospital onto tranquilizing drugs, regardless of history or threat of violence. So that's the classic thing, right? You have to be proven to be a harm to yourself or others. That's the classic Section 8. Baker acting, right? Isn't that it? Something like that?
Yeah.
Dad's had to do a few. So, technically, Kendra's Law does not force people to be drugged. Technically. But in reality, psychiatric treatment often offers little else. If people don't follow orders, they are brought by police back to a hospital until they abide, agreeing to take psychiatric drugs adhering to the psychiatric's plans is often a condition of being discharged from the hospital. Already, most people committed under this law have never displayed any evidence of violence, and unsurprisingly, due to racist policing practices and racism within the medical system, they tend to be disproportionately people of color. Let's not forget the Tuskegee people, and what happened with them. Or, you know, the countless women whose, you know, fallopian tubes have been removed, you know, against their will. So, yeah, specifically, roughly 35% are black, while only 33% are white. The group of individuals involuntarily committed to hospitals also tend to be disproportionately black and brown. So, New York's outpatient commitment statute is one of its first of its kind. Today, some form of Kendra's Law, or AOT, exists in 47 states and the District of Columbia. So, that's also, you get to deal with that. So
Right.
fun. Just look normal, Collin. Look normal. Don't look crazy. Look normal.
But
So,
it's right. So pause
yes.
1 second. So you know what? Unfortunately, living in DC, I kind of see this all the time, you know, like especially with the homeless population here. You know, like they do some mess that people get scared, they call the cops, and then the cops, you know, have to deal with the issue. And, you know, I'm not sure what happens to them, but
yeah.
you know, but so I see this all the time,
Yep.
you know, in terms of like how the homeless and those who have mental issues clearly have mental issues in the city. And again, many of them.
Well, this goes down to, I remember, I think it was honestly NPR, which I only am forced to listen to if I'm in the car with my mother. But they talked about how even at like a kindergarten level, black and brown, especially men, end up being deemed like aggressive and problem children a lot earlier and a lot more frequently than others.
Yeah, I have a story just from yesterday. So I went to my Advocacy monthly meeting yesterday and we did a check-in, mental chat. Had a colleague at another charter school who, student, not hers, but a student in the school, had an episode. To the point where, you know, it was, you know, like they called, I forgot who it was, like community services, and they recommended, no, call the police. And then because the police cannot deal with this child was 11. They arrested her and dragged her out in a gurney because they could not de-escalate her. So the idea that, so the idea that like, first of all, like aren't cops supposed to be trained to, well, they don't. Like I just told them myself, they're not trained to de-escalate. But first of all, the idea that you're doing that to an 11-year-old girl, like you're arresting her. Now, this child probably has going through some trauma in of itself, but the idea of having to be arrested by the cops for essentially having an episode.
Yeah, but that's not traumatic. They give you a lollipop, you know, like you get a sticker, you get to meet the dare dog. Like you don't want to go meet the dare dog?
Right.
Come on, Collin.
So this is the idea. So this is why, you know, especially, you know, for me and like Savvy was just here, RBN, these are why we're saying defund the police. We need police, community policing. We need, like, you don't need the cops to take care of that. You need mental health specialists, you need social workers in order to take care of that stuff. Cops are not trained, especially our cops, to do that. You know, and you're only adding to the trauma for this poor child and others like that.
Oh, but wait,
you're just gonna.
There's more. There's more. You think that's bad? Like, let's get into the weeds. So in February, so this is because he's Eric Adams is expanding the reach of this law, right? This what law was it? Can you remember? I already have forgotten. That's it. Kendra's Law. right? And I covered what that was, right? Apparently some like lady killed herself, I think, and like some stuff came out from that Kinder's Law. But I thought I had it in here. In February, the New York State Office of Mental Health published guidance clarifying that a person can be involuntarily hospitalized under state law if they appear to be mentally ill, and display an inability to meet basic living needs, even when there is no recent dangerous act. So because you can't meet basic living needs, like having a home, right? That's what this means. Okay? So, at a press conference this week, Adams unveiled a memo stating that the city concurs with the state agency's interpretation and directing police and peace officers, quote unquote, to begin removing any individual who appears to have mental illness and cannot support their basic human needs to an extent that causes them harm. So, civil rights advocates say the directive's vague language gives police carte blanche to detain unhoused people in New York based on arbitrary and potentially inaccurate evaluations of their mental health. To officers, the mayor's guidance serves as a green light that tells them, you have my permission to do it, however you need to do it, to get homeless people off the street, said Lisa Ortega, community organizer with Take Back the Bronx. Don't know if you've heard of them, but so under the mayor's plan, police officers will have prolonged contact with people prior to their hospitalization. The policy requires a peace or police officer to be present at the scene of all involuntary removal attempts to ensure the individual stays on scene. Officers must also escort emergency services personnel on trips to the hospital and ride in the back of a transport vehicle. The escorting officer can leave only after the person has been registered as a patient at the hospital. So cop stays you with that whole trip, one that's not trained in what, Collin? Like, this is all about mental health, right?
Right.
When they know absolutely nothing.
Right.
Well, and this is also going to lead to, like, yes, the cop then has to escort someone in a van, in a, like, you know, all the way there to the hospital. Then they get there. Then they're handed off to the state hospital, essentially.
Well, you know what's funny? Because this just reminded me, like, when I was in college, I had mono. So freshman year. So, like, and it was bad. So I was in the infirmary. Well, I was in the infirmary on campus, but it got to the point where I got so sick, I had to be transferred to the hospital for like 2 nights. But then, like, when they were ready to take me back to my dorm, it was the cops who escorted me. Like, they had to put me in their police car, you know, in order to take me back to campus. And it was just kind of like, I mean, I didn't think of it at the time, but it just now thinking about it, it was just kind of like, why would they send the cops in order, you know, because I was going home.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, but I think it's just like anything that goes down, get the cops.
Yes.
And again, the cops are not necessarily trained to do the stuff in a way that gives humanity to people that they're working with and dealing with.
Yeah, let's add extra trauma, you know, with police arresting the mentally ill. Yeah, I mean,
right.
Exactly. So Adams has insisted that his directive is an overdue and compassionate response to help people the city has discarded. But to truly help homeless people, they should be given access to housing and community-based services, said Ortega. They make it seem like you cannot get well or get an apartment until you're A, B, and C, but it's really the opposite way around. If you give someone a stable place to put their head and they become conducive to, okay, maybe now we can move forward and recover, it doesn't work the other way around. It just doesn't. So, what did I go too far?
Yeah, you went too far.
How did that happen? Where did I stop?
I think go forward.
Yes, this The involvement of law enforcement in these potentially tense interactions only raises the likelihood of arrest and violence, said Renee Carefa Johnson, who works with FWD, a criminal justice reform organization, increasing points of contact with police for communities like Black communities, unhoused communities, brown communities, disabled communities, queer communities, inevitably leads to increased criminalization and state violence, she said. Police are trained in command and control, said Beth Harules, a senior staff attorney with the New York Civil Liberties Union. People who have a disability or are impaired in some fashion, they don't respond simply to command and control. If an officer perceives an individual as aggressive or uncooperative during a removal attempt, they could face criminal charges, which would only entangle them in the legal system and make it harder for them to access housing and support. People in mental health crises routinely end up getting charged over encounters with police or medical personnel, according to a report published last year by the Disability Rights New York and John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Despite the well-documented risk that police pose to people with mental illness, the mayor's directive does not limit the weapons or force an officer can use during these removals. If you don't immediately comply with a police officer's orders or directive, the situation is immediately escalated. The police officer will just automatically try to put handcuffs on you, said Young-Mi Lee, legal director of criminal defense at Brooklyn Defender Services. Involuntary removals and hospitalizations are already traumatic and often marked by physical conflict, said Timothy Clune, executive director of Disability Rights New York. Given the lack of expertise of these designated to make a determination that one appears to be mentally ill, there is a high likelihood that people with and without such disabilities will be erroneously removed and detained, Clune said in a statement to the appeal. Adams has insisted that his directive is an overdue and compassionate response to help the people the city has discarded, but to truly help homeless people. We read this. This is the last page.
Yeah.
So... But yeah, opposite way around on the A, B, and C. Closing thoughts on this, Collin?
Defund the police.
Sure.
Honestly, and yeah, I think it just gives Joe's videos that you played earlier. Those of you who are now just coming in, welcome. If you wondering where Savvy is, she only had an hour to give, so she was here for the 8 o'clock hour, our time. So. Yep. Go back and rewatch to hear Savvy's take on policing and Africa's take on Ukraine. Those are the two segments we've done so far. Yep. But again, as I said, just yesterday, having to hear of a teacher describing how the cops had to arrest and remove a child from a school because she was having an episode and they couldn't de-escalate her to the point where she was able to kind of function properly.
Yes.
I think just kind of speaks to, how much I think I'm going to be very fair to cops for a quick second.
You don't have to.
I don't have to, but I will for this. And then I'll go back to my original thought of the cops anyway.
Sure.
That's too much that cops have to deal with. Like, cops do not have to be trained. They're not. But we call them for pretty much to deal with everything. Yes. We call for them in terms of like fire, depending on where you are, because there may not be enough, fire engine stations to help with an emergency, depending where you live.
Get your cat out of a tree.
Right. Getting cat out of a tree, like simple shit, that it's it can be.
They're not capable of being trained in all those things.
Right.
Like they're just not.
Right. But I think the idea is when you're in trouble, call the cops.
Yeah.
Things go down, call the cops. And so I think in a lot of ways, I don't want to say people, but I think intentionally and unintentionally, I think people give cops more power than I think they truly deserve because we rely on them for everything in terms of an emergency. Whereas if we have people who are trained And then I think that also speaks to the education, like we need more social workers, we need more mental health professionals. And I think looking at our federal government, these are things that Biden should make endorsements for, besides other things.
This is a thing that's possible in 49 states.
Right.
That a mayor could just do.
Right.
Especially ones that want to deal with a homeless problem.
Right.
Like, I don't know, Houston, LA, Chicago, Detroit, like how many we want to go with?
I will want to bet because it's pretty much almost every state, but I would bet, you could basically say this is a federal law. You can basically say that.
Generally, yeah. Or this Kendra's law, right? You know, that modifies
is it not? Probably what Hawaii?
Probably.
I'm just guessing here.
Yeah, like where are we gonna move? Like where are we moving to? Yeah.
But I think these are the things that I think about, and I think especially in terms of education, and I think especially in higher ed, these are like policies that Biden himself, especially given his wife,
yes,
who is a teacher,
yes,
professor, these are the things that she should be advocating for. Like we need more teachers, we need more social workers, we need more mental health professionals. Like make it so that it's easier for people who want to do it to get into it, and then pay them or forgive their student debt so that you have interest in people wanting to go in these professions, and they come out and they're able to tackle a lot of these issues that the cops are not necessarily able to deal with. Like,
well, and
these are the things that
me.
I think.
I mean, like, I've talked about training police in jiu-jitsu for a long time. What I'm worried about is that this law will unequivocally cause more deaths because cops do not know how to physically control anyone, like, at all. In most places, they get barely any training in hand-to-hand grappling in any way, shape, or form. And that's if they're lucky. Most of them have to get that on their own because they realize they need it, right? Because otherwise, what's left in the toolbox, Collin? Like, if you're fearful of your life as a cop, you're allowed to, like, which usually people start doing that fight or flight thing when what's called the amygdala hijack happens, which is whether you have had a perceived or actual loss of control. That adrenaline starts kicking in, right? So it turns into survival. So you're just going to go to the thing on the hip. That's all that's left for you, generally, which happens way too many times for us to count. And this is just going to get more of that.
Right.
For someone who's just homeless.
Sorry, Markia Voss in the chat, she had a question. She said, can you invite some of the defund speakers from RBN General Strike Summit? Yeah, we can.
Would love to. Yeah, we'll reach out. We're in talks with Meadows to get some people in ballot initiatives over as well.
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
I have a feeling, well, I said this. I feel like really for 2023, which is in a few weeks. Oh my God. Like, which will kind of, I think, might be a good segue into our last segment of the night. But
yes,
but we really need to focus on organizing around policies, and I think within the local and state levels in particular, so that people know how to manage and kind of control that and kind of be empowered to be able to speak out on those issues and own it. That could be elevated up to the federal level. And by then, the idea is that you'll have people who are willing to be in leadership, wherever it is city council, wherever it is mayor or whatever else within local state level or state senate, to be able to better advocate for these issues within states. Those people could eventually maybe push into the federal plane as well. So I think we really need to, a lot of these issues as far as ballot initiatives, defund the police, reparations, all this stuff Medicare for all this, like 10 demands for justice. Yes, Eric, thank you. Like all of this stuff we really need to start organizing around, so really, I think, honestly, in my mind, 2023, in my mind, is like the year of organization. But I think learning what organization is and what it isn't, and I know we talk about organization on the show quite a bit, but I think we really need to kind of develop that into practice of what that means on the left and what it means in terms of having a long-term goal and really thinking strategically of what needs to happen in order for these things to get implemented. So I don't think we really talk about this, how to do it.
Right.
So, but I think we need to have, I think, on the left, guidance as to what that can look like on a local level. So basically, fuck the federal level, because they're not helping us. You don't have access to them, and they ignore you when you do try to, if you are lucky enough to talk to a congressman or a senator and just be like, these are the issues that are important to me. These are the things that I advocate for. And they will just laugh or just slam the door in your face, as we have seen.
I mean, as Ed would like to remind us that the only federal solution is lava based. So, but you want to show the people how not to do it?
Yes, I was like, what are you talking about? But yeah, but this is a way not to, you're right. This is a way not to do it. So our final segment, which, being transparent, I'm on, like, this is what we wanted Savvy to talk about, but obviously she talked about it last night. She talked about DSA on Right Hill Rising yesterday. I know RBN has talked about it, so you probably have gotten this enough.
Yes.
So
luckily we have a
just as
clip
well
of Savvy, probably.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yes, we do. We do have a clip on Savvy, but basically, if you're leaving with it, no, don't leave. Stay, hang out. At least through this.
Yeah, it's
at
short.
least since you're here.
We're almost done.
It will be fairly short. I'm sure a lot of you know about this already.
We're at
but
9:30. We got time.
Yeah,
So-
but basically, DSA sucks ass.
Yes.
I think that's very apparent. Well, I've known this now
And
for
have
well
been
over
for a
2
minute.
years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've known this for over 2 years, and I'll get to that more specifically of why I know that specifically. But yeah, this is my rant of, well, not even of the week now, but like, this is my rant of the moment about DSA. Now, why are we talking about DSA? Again, I think it is important. Like, our thing is here, we don't want to cover stories that it's just oversaturated to the point that we talk about it and people are just kind of like, we're over it.
We want people
That
to
being
start
said-
the saturation.
Right.
know?
But I think in this case, I think it is important to talk about this and oversaturate, because should serve as a cautionary tale for us of how not to organize, but more importantly, how to hold politicians accountable. That's the umbrella of this.
Let me guess. We've got something that we should be fighting for, but that's not happening. People are fighting against something.
Yeah.
Just wondering.
And I would have played Kwame. I would have added him. I thought about it this morning and I forgot to because I ended up.
We got to get. We'll send some choice clips to Savvy for her to cover. I'm sure she knows of them, but they're good. You know. So.
But anyway, so let's start with Savvy. And the only reason why I thought of DSA at all is this is in regards to railroad workers, basically getting hosed in terms of the benefits that they wanted and then losing their ability to strike. We'll know something more for sure, I guess, by Friday. So we'll see. And again, Savvy said she's going to have a railroad worker on tomorrow. So definitely tune in for
Tune into that.
And watch that. Support Savvy and RBN. But I didn't think of DSA at all until Savvy brought this up on her stream last week. So come on. There we go. So let's just review what Sabby said in terms of DSA on her stream.
What?
But let's kick this off with Shama Sawant because she called it out clear as day. All but one of the squad crossed the picket line, voting with Dem Republican majority to break a rail workers' strike. A socialist cannot be a strike breaker. This should result in expulsion from DSA. Failing that, the squad's betrayal of workers becomes DSA's betrayal. And I'm glad she referenced DSA here because I think it is important to note that they do represent Democratic Socialists of America. And there are certain policies that that organization has. And from what I've seen, there are some policies that the squad has not been implementing. They have not been following, and they have not been implementing those policies at all. Let's all remember, you know, if we flash back towards last year when I told you that DSA, national DSA, wanted to remove Jamal Bowman because he violated their policy about Israel, because he went over to Israel multiple times, which is actually, that's not something that DS.
We're back.
Wow.
It ended. The clip ended.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I thought there was a little bit more, but okay. So yeah, so those of you who don't know, DSA, well, essentially AOC, Tlaib, Bush, and there was one other squad member. It might be Jamal Bowman, but I'm not entirely sure. I think so, since Savvy said it. If you're in the chat, if you know who this, but basically about 4 squad members who are affiliated with the DSA. So, you know, obviously, given how the squad voted in terms of preventing the workers from striking,
yes,
the DSA really should be more pissed in terms of what's that?
I wanted people to go look at, I think it was me and Indy on How Did We Miss That, which if Indy's still here, he might be able to find it for us, but go look, and we covered a story about Bernie Sanders being deemed the strike killer.
Yeah.
You know, because of things like this, very similar to how Obama killed the NBA strike. That, right. Yes, they talk about being pro-labor and putting on a comfortable shoe. But the only time they do that is to make sure that you capitulate to demands. You know?
Speaking of Bernie. Speaking of, so World Socialist website, this article, this perspective written by Tom Hall, basically very damning in terms of Bernie Sanders' DSA played a crucial role in passing anti-strike law against railroad workers. So, and he said, yeah, it was in January.
And it was also a WS article.
Yeah. So he writes, last Thursday, Senate voted by a margin of 80 to 15 to impose the terms of a national rail contract that tens of thousands of workers were voted to reject. The vote in the Senate followed the law's passage Wednesday in the House. The law, which does not even include the fig leaf of 7 paid sick leaves, that is not enough, that was narrowly approved as a separate measure in the House, is a major assault on the democratic rights of all workers in the United States. While Wall Street breathed a sigh of relief, hopefully for not too long, the vote resolves nothing from the standpoint of railroaders. Workers still have not agreed to anything, and they cannot accept as illegitimate a dictatorial vote based on the right, quote unquote, to override workers that Congress has arrogated to itself. To a far more direct and open degree than before, workers are locked in a fight against the capitalist state itself. To the extent that anything positive has come out of this is that the vote completely exposes all factions of the political establishment. This includes the self-described most pro-labor president in American history, Joe Biden. But a critical role that was also played by the pseudo-left factions of the Democratic Party, including Senator Bernie Sanders and the 4 members of the House who are affiliated with DSA. The pro-company, anti-worker dictatorial measure could not have passed in the form that it did, with the speed that it did, without their support. On Tuesdays, House Democrats introduced a separate resolution originally drafted by Sanders in the Senate to add 7 paid sick days on top of the contract they were imposing. This was a sham aimed at providing political cover. It had no chance of reaching the 60-vote threshold to overcome a filibuster in the Senate. Even if it did pass both houses, it would do next to nothing to seriously address workers' demands. Before the vote on the sick days resolution, 3 out of the 4 DSA members of the House joined in the vast majority of Democrats to vote in favor of imposing the contract, including AOC. Defending her vote, Ocasio-Cortez neither nonsensically claimed that her vote to block a strike and impose the contract was cast in order to allow the Senate Democrats to fight for sick days in the Senate. Slight problem with that, thought AOC. You have a senator, a known senator in the Democrat Party, that is known to vote against bills. You know that senator,
Yep.
Mr. Breland.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so didn't consider that senator, well, 2, but that senator in particular who is known to torpedo bills like this. So,
yeah, we got some super rays, which are always appreciated, from Roger Meadows over on Rockfin.
Oh, you got some monies?
Yep, appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, since, you know, you missed out on Savvy though, Roger, but I'll read them. I'll go back up. Hello, there we go. So, KRS-One, big fan of KRS-One, called America on his 1990 album Edutainment Land of the thief, home of the slave. It is any different than during slavery. If you saw a black person without a white person accompanying them, was legitimate. If we told them we were freedmen, they asked us for your papers to prove who you are. Today, the police, the descendants of slave patrols, ask for your ID. What has changed? He gives another $2 tip. In New York City, we transferred prosecutorial powers from local DAs to a special independent prosecutor appointed by the AG. Although it was good, it didn't go far enough. The indie prosecutor should be picked by the community that was harmed. The surviving family members of the victim was with the full weight and resources of the New York City AG office behind them. Roger continues, also NYPD, better not forget that de Blasio got rid of QI, is that QJ, before leaving, so now police pensions will no longer be shielded from lawsuits. This is why NYPD has been leaving en masse. Also, Eric Adams and Governor Hochul are in the pocket of the 2 biggest money donors in New York City, Rev New York, real estate brokers, New York and Wall Street. Their donors who own these big Manhattan buildings are losing money as people work from home. Working class people, their donors have made them homeless, so Adams feels that if he gets rid of them, people will come back. Dumbass. I live outside New York City. In Long Island, Railroad commuters were paying $400 to $600 for a monthly Long Island Railroad pass, money they got to save. Same, I guess, for Metro North and New Jersey Transit. Adams tried to pull at heartstrings by supporting New York City essential workers, but we can stay home, work from home, and support our own essential workers as we go to the local deli up the block in our community where we pay our property taxes in. So my guess is Adams is sweating his property value and Manhattan is going down, so they are driving up rent rates via rent speculation to get the money before there's no more money to get perfect opportunity to bring in a public bank, says Roger Meadows. So, you know,
thank you, Roger. Appreciate
the tips. But continue your story, Collin.
All right. Okay. So the Senate, after voting to reject a Republican proposal to extend the deadline into February, voted down the sick days proposal as expected in a near party line vote, with Democrat Joe Manchin playing his assigned role of withdrawing with Republicans against his own party. Sanders' defeated proposal in the Senate was framed as an amendment to the anti-strike bill, whereas the House proposal to add 6 days was voted on separately. This means that because both houses passed identical legislation with respect to the question of imposing the contract itself, the bill went immediately to Biden's desk without delay. Any delay would have been completely unacceptable to the ruling class which was demanding the contract to be imposed immediately, well before Friday's strike deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Sanders and the Democrats are cynically using the Republican opposition to sick days to posture as friends of workers. Do that well. After they voted to impose the contract by an even wider margin than the Republicans, many of whom voted against it for factional reasons. But even the New York Times, the House organ of the Democrat Party, could not avoid admitting the obvious. In a statement that perfectly captured the yawning gap between Democratic Party rhetoric and behavior, Times editorial board member Benjamin Applebaum observed in an opinion piece.
Boots with the fur.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi denounced railroad companies as rapacious profiteers who had been selling out to Wall Street to boost their bottom lines, making obscene profits while demanding more and more from railroad workers. Then just one sentence later, she announced that the House Democrats would stand with profiteers. There was no such admission, however, from Jacobin magazine, which functions as a mouthpiece for the DSA. Following the House vote, but hours before the Senate vote, it rushed to publish a comment with the triumphant headline, "Democrats were differing on railroaders' rights. The left just forced their hand," written by Branko Martetic. Martetic's entire column was devoted to creating an absurd narrative whereby the intervention of Sanders, AOC, and others had, for all brilliant and principled politicking, succeeded in shifting the entire political establishment to the left. After this pretense was exploded less than 24 hours later with the Senate vote, Jacobin discreetly moved the article from its lead spot to far down on the front page. Exposed in the process is the entire political function and outlook of the pseudo-left. There is nothing socialist about them. They are an important element of capitalistic political control over the working class. Using empty populist demagoguery, they serve to corral and diffuse opposition from below, provide a left cover for the Democratic Party as it lurches further to the right, and keep workers trapped within the confines of capitalistic politics. To be blunt, they could not give a damn how many railroaders are pushed into early graves by brutal attendance policies. So, actually, there's more. Sorry. Their politics reflects the outlook and defends the interests of a privileged section of the middle class, which includes in its ranks substantial elements of the union apparatus itself, more specifically their leadership. The DSA, Labor Notes, and other pseudo-left groups unconditionally defend the union apparatus, in which the railroad, in the rail struggle and every other struggle has played a critical role in suppressing, diverting, and blocking the efforts of workers to oppose the corporations. Against the initiative of railroad workers to form the Railroad Workers Rank and File Committee, which has played the leading role in mobilizing opposition, the pseudo-left responds with undisguised hostility. The pseudo-left, in opposition to genuine socialist internationalism, is nationalist, pro-war, and pro-capitalist. What predominates within these layers is an intense struggle for access to privileges. A central feature of this brand of politics is the use of racial and gender politics, both to deflect from the more fundamental issue of class and as a lever to jockey for positions among themselves.
The hoes be knowing.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. You're right. The hoes be knowing. Therefore, the pseudo-left is deeply hostile to the working class, whose fight for equity threatens to abolish, not redistribute, privilege. Having said A, they will also say B. If the state injunction against the railroad workers is defiled by the workers themselves, the next step for the ruling class will be physical repression, arrests, and violence. The pseudo-left will back that as well. They have unwittingly made a powerful argument for social revolution in the United States. For this, workers need real socialism, not the fake socialism on offer from the pseudo-left. This means the fight for the political independence of the working class and the fight for a workers' government, which organizes society in the interest of human need, not private profit. So basically, this was all in terms of Bernie, the squad, and the DSA that basically ran cover for the railroad workers in the guise of being left, when it's probably shown that they're not left. So, so to kind of going off that, so I tweeted this out, I believe, on Sunday. So actually, if you go back, It is imperative that DSA members provide support to workers on strike. I'll say where I got that from in a second. DSA, you have squad members affiliated with your organization that failed to do this for Railroad Workers Union. What's your move? So I tweeted that on Sunday, I believe, early in the morning.
Hmm.
And the reason why I did that, because in light of what Sabby said, I said to and I had some time, as I sometimes do on Sunday. So I said to myself, let me peruse over to the DSA. And we talk about principles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious to see what the DSA had to say in something in regards to this. So if you zoom out for a bit.
Yes.
This
here.
is
Here you go.
this is part of the DSA political platform. This is on their website. Not going to read all of it for time. You can find it on your own. But there was a part that interests me that I also did include in the tweet below, but I wanted to read it a little more of it for emphasis.
Hmm.
So in part of this, the DSA says, but we have some cause for optimism. The Red for Ed strike wave, union reform movements, and workplace organizing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic indicate a rise of a fighting spirit among union and non-union workers. It is imperative that DSA members fan that flame by taking rank and file union jobs, organizing new unions in their workplaces, building reform caucuses that fight for democracy in their unions, and providing support to workers on strike. That's where I got that quote from. It will take a huge fight to win any improvement to the lives of the working class people. As organized militant working class is the only force capable of winning these fights. As socialists, we see every battle as an opportunity to cohere the class into that force, one that is capable of transforming the relationships of ownership and production. What does that sound like to you?
Organizing for something?
From the current system of exploitation and private acclamation into a socialized system that serves the common good.
Has the DSA ever spoken on general strike?
I don't think so, Reef. But
okay.
But that as I said, I tweeted my tweet and I circled where they said, they support strikes.
Yes.
I think Sunday morning. And I believe by Sunday afternoon, DSA blessed us with a response. Oh, actually, no. Let me step back. There's more to it. So actually go back.
I got it.
Next slide.
This one?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So again, these are more of their principles that they also listed on the website. The socialist movement and the labor movement will rise or fall together. Our demands: social ownership of all major industries and infrastructure, the right to strike for all workers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at will employment, and right of work laws. Immediately raise the federal minimum wage to $15 with no exceptions for disability, tip workers, or any other reason, and index it to inflation. So these are DSA these are the DSA demands. These are the things that AOC, Tlaib, Bush, and I believe Jamal Bowman, if he's the fourth person affiliated with DSA, should be fighting for and pushing for. Right?
Yep.
So you would think with all of this and the fact of how the squad voted, with the exception of Tlaib, that they would be a little more scathing in their response. Let's see what they said.
Let's see.
Okay.
Tiny text.
So this fall, the majority of railroad workers rejected a tentative agreement brokered by their bosses and union leadership that would not include sick leave or an end to precision schedule railroading and other fundamental improvements on their working conditions. Railroad work is notoriously brutal. On call, nearly around the clock, workers suffer regular, often fatal accidents due to overwork and exhaustion. and yet the TA lacks any paid sick leave, let alone the 15 days demanded by rank and file workers. Unions representing the majority of all railroad workers rejected the deal. The 8 other rail unions that did ratify to the deal pledged to honor the picket line should other unions strike. Biden and his administration sold out workers when they imposed this terrible contract on railroad workers through the antiquated Railway Labor Act. We condemn the move by President Biden and Congress to force over 100,000 rail workers to accept the TA by denying them the legal right to strike, our ultimate leverage as workers under capitalism. When every major power in the country, the center, the right, and our laws, aligned against workers, DSA members in Congress introduced a legislative push for sick days, again, not enough, and forced a vote on the measure. No, they did not, which did not succeed.
Wait. DSA wants what again? What was that? Force the something? What was that? I distinctly remember a particular Chicagoan individual talking about that. You know?
I'm having in church, yeah.
Bitches.
We need on the soundboard.
Yep. I'm down. Oh God.
That very thing. Yeah. So yeah. And it's like, what, the vote? Yep.
Yep.
So just to clarify,
it's WS asking to force the vote.
Just a little,
okay.
Just for a quick second, Reef, because I know you know this, and our friends in the chat would also know this. Did Jimmy come up with force the vote on his own?
No.
Where did the idea of force?
No.
Where did the idea of force the vote come from, sir?
Children at home. I think that's that DSA handbook you got there in your pew. You know, like, like, yep. Okay.
DSA talked about the idea of force the vote in their manifesto, and they're talking about it here, which they didn't do, but they demanded. Well, at least again, this was after the fact. So they released this over the weekend, but they wanted them to force the vote, Reef. So all those fuckers who say that force the vote should be a thing, and we said it last week, Republicans are doing it with Kevin McCarthy right now, but that's seemingly okay, right? But the squad can enforce a vote with the same numbers, similar numbers to what the Republicans have the majority of in the House right now. You know,
and
enforce the vote.
Wasn't there a minority leader vote recently?
Right.
Who did anyone know what happened with that? We now have a Mr. Jeffries,
right,
as minority leader. Y'all just missed that, huh?
Of which they basically tucked tail and like voted for him anyway.
Yes.
So,
with media saying nothing. Move along, nothing to see here.
Right.
You know.
Anyway, we are proud of DSA member Rashida Tlaib's vote against the TA for 6 days. I mean, that's such a low
bar.
Yeah, I mean, bar, but yeah, I guess. But any vote by Congress to impose a bad contract on workers sides with the boss and contradicts democratic socialist values. We disagree and are disappointed with the decisions of DSA members AOC and Cori Bush to needlessly vote to enforce the TA. The members are the union, and the majority of members voted to reject the TA. Socialist elects must stand with unions when they reject a TA. The vote to defend a worker's right to strike was an opportunity to further organize the public in solidarity with the rail workers. The left cannot afford to miss these moments. So they're disappointed and they disagree, which is what I feel with a lot of people, like especially in larger spaces, when their critique on the squad is that they disagree and they're disappointed.
Yeah, but Boyne. But what about Boyne?
Well, fuck that. No, not fuck Bernie. Like DSA, you should like one, call them out, and two, get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't you doing that? Well, we know why.
Yeah. We know why.
Fuck you.
That's why.
But
Like,
the idea, but this is the excuse I see with many people on the left that basically stands for the squad. And Bernie is like, any criticism to me is very tepid, just like this. It's just like, oh, we disagree and we don't like it. So the question is, how are you going to keep them accountable? Not a damn thing.
Yep.
You know, I remember like Jimmy has mentioned, I mentioned Jimmy here. Again, with Forced to Vote, he asked Kyle, who was, remember, Kyle was co-founder of the Justice Democrats, another shitty organization, basically asked, if they don't force the vote, this is what he asked to Kyle, if they don't force the vote, how are we going to keep the squad accountable? And Kyle basically said, we're not.
Yeah, they're just a bad ally. They're just a bad ally.
But what's the difference between, what's the difference between a bad ally and an enemy? What's the difference?
I don't know.
You know? So really this is bullshit. Like the DSA should have been a lot more. DSA should have been a lot more scathing. DSA basically should have been like, you're out. You are no longer affiliated with us. But my guess is they want that access to the squad. So they didn't want to necessarily, you know, legitimize themselves from, you know, going harder again for access to them.
Yes, it's all about
unity.
You know what I'm saying? You gotta unify behind them. That's how it always works.
Right.
You know?
Yipper, I'm just seeing in the chat, Yipper is like, Collin, don't you know there is a difference between corruption and soft corruption?
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, so I do have a couple of
thing
slides.
in this article, I think, literally last slide. The economy depends on workers, and we can't decide we're not going to take crumbs anymore. That's exactly why Biden and the ruling class were so determined to prevent a strike, and that's exactly why socialist politicians must support workers' ability to organize and strike at all costs. No excuses.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much same thing we said. It's definitely no teeth. Politicians got no teeth here either. You know, the only people that got teeth are the ones that wield the power. What power do they wield, Collin? The power of production. It's been yours the whole time.
Right.
It's time to take that shit back.
Right.
I say general fucking strike. If you're going to do one illegal strike, you might as well do a couple. Collin, are you allowed to strike in DC as a teacher?
No. No.
Right. How many other people are not allowed to strike?
Like most public.
Yes.
Like public works industries are not allowed to strike. Like I can talk about this now because I kind of withheld some of my thoughts on my Empower Ed stream because, like I said, then I'm representing Empower Ed. There's certain things I can say because, you know, like I didn't want my butt to get angry, you know, but I'll say it now. You know, like that was the issue that I had with my union here.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I wanted us to strike. Like, striking mean walking out of a school building during the day and protesting. The way that they kind of worked around it in my union is that they'll do a walkout, quote unquote, but it'll be before or after school hours. That's not strike.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah, that affects no one other than you.
Right. And then people, and then it's actually, no, it affects the teachers because it's like.
Yes. You have to stay for more time than
we
you
have
were,
to take time off our day, like off the clock,
unpaid.
In order to do that. Unpaid in order to do that.
Yeah.
You know, so really that's more hurtful to us than it is to anybody else. Like the idea of a strike, it's meant to hurt.
Yes.
And given, you know, and people are like, well, and this is what we're seeing in the media. It's like, oh, like, you know, like if they strike, the economy is going to be, you know, like the railroad industry is like probably one of the biggest industries. Do you think they're gonna let that go for more than a day or two?
Right. They're
without
worried about
making
their
demands?
economy. They're going to start
Right.
and don't accept half loaves. Make your demands, make them large demands. Like, we got to
Right.
teach you people how to haggle here. Like, make
Right.
them big demands. Like, it's
Right.
time for
So,
you
well,
as a
I think-
worker.
Right.
It's time for you
Wait.
as a worker to start having that
Catch me outside. How about that?
attitude.
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
time.
But you know what? You brought up a good point because, like,
Well,
in the
like,
global south, I'll say in the global south, that's the idea of haggling.
yes.
You know, you don't start from the middle.
No.
Both go to the extreme
Yes.
and then come to the middle.
Right.
So that both parties get more or less what they want. But the thing is, with the Democrats, they start from the middle,
They start way to the right.
right, and then they move all the way over
Yeah.
to, like, basically it's just a watered down version of what they
Yes.
want. The idea of organizing is you go big,
Yes.
like
Or
you
go home.
hard. You go hard to the left,
Yeah.
and then from there you
Well,
compromise from there.
we know a
And
lot of
then-
these big unions are already compromised. They don't want to do any of those things. You
Well,
know,
I'll say this,
I think
and
with solidarity
let's-
strikes are technically illegal in this country. And like I said,
let's clarify that. Let's
Yep.
clarify that a little bit. It's not unions per se; it's union leadership.
leadership. Yes.
Right.
I would say and there's particular corporate unions, and especially anyone involving themselves with the NLRB, right? Things like that. Like, I'm talking about Teamsters. I'm talking about AFL-CIO. I'm talking about all those cats that have kind of been company men for a while, you know?
This is
So-
why, and I know Indy's in the chat, but so
Yeah.
I'm going to say it. I've said this to you. I've said this to Indy. Unions, to me, are just merely a compromise.
Mm-hmm.
They are. Because you
Yep.
still have to negotiate. Like, that's what I'm doing right now. Like, you know, as I said to you guys last week, I got a tentative contract, but nothing has changed really in the contract. If anything, things are stagnant. You know, they haven't, like, the idea of, for me, if you're getting a new contract, you should be getting more power, not less, you know? So the idea that you still have to negotiate for basic shit that you should be getting anyway, to me is just kind of like ridiculous. And unfortunately, within a union, that's what you have to do, because you have to negotiate with corporations that don't want to give it to you. And and they could drag this out for years.
Yeah.
Like I said, like with my union, like we're heading into our 4th year without a new renewed contract, you know? So you know, but all that to say, this is why, again, we kind of need to talk more about worker co-ops and
Mhm.
what those are, you know. But to go back to DSA, fuck you all. And again, not to all DSA. I want to preface that.
Fuck you all, but not really. You
Well,
know?
I'll say this because I meant to say this earlier. Like, when I went to Force the Vote protests 2 years ago in DC, there were DC members there who actually supported it, but they mentioned to me that it was their leadership that was kind of like flaking in terms of whether they support doing it or not at that time. So
Mhm.
I don't want to discount DSA members, because I think, and again, it depends, but I think generally members have more on it. It's their leadership that sucks. So I want
Yeah.
to preface that, you know, because obviously, like, I'm sure DSA members didn't write this response
No.
of being like, oh, we're disappointed with AOC and all this bullshit. No, you should be saying, fuck you, out. You crossed the picket line. Get out. That's not reflection of our values. And you went against that. Same thing with Justice Democrats. We talked about, you know, some of the principles that, well, Jen and Kyle wrote, that they obviously are not doing either. Out.
Yep.
You know, but they're not doing it. And That's why we are in this shit in this country, you know. And like I'm thinking about it with Warnock, who won barely. You know, like people are making that as like a huge win, but it's like, dude barely won, you know. But then, as I said this on Twitter, like, so where's our money though?
Yes.
You know,
Where's
where's the
anything?
fact? Where's the fact? And connected to this, Warner didn't vote for this. You know, he didn't vote against, like, he was a no vote for the railroad workers, but he was like in his speech when he won, oh, I stand for workers. We don't know that.
Yeah. So speaking of workers, Roger Meadows with another $2 tip. Appreciate your
Thank
generosity,
you.
friend. Also, remote workers saved money on childcare since they're home. He did get caught savvy while he was here. PBs would be good since personal banks would be good since politicians are too afraid to raise taxes to improve quality of life because they are afraid it will chase businesses away. DSA need to get out of the operation of supporting politicians and use that energy to start filling for and pushing for ballot initiatives instead of wasting our time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
as always, agree
Like,
with you, Roger.
yeah, I agree. And like I said, we need to have more discussions on ballot initiatives. We need to have more discussions on organizing what
We're
that
going
truly
to,
entails.
in fact.
And yeah, like, and don't join these
Oh,
groups.
Roger
Don't
with
join
another
these
one.
groups. Yeah.
Where's the law that would have ripped away ownership from Buffett and the rest of the private equity ghouls, rail carriers, and either nationalize it or corporatize it? Off topic, black folks missed their chance last night by re-electing Warnock after
Yes.
not delivering on those promised 2K checks. I didn't
Yes.
want Walker to win, just wanted Warnock to lose. Reaffirming Dems don't need to do anything for black people. Let me tell you about Kwame Ture
Right.
and what he says about organizing. You
We
have
need
to
to
be
play that clip.
organizing
We have to play
for
that clip.
something. Well, I'm
Right.
going to get on the soundboard soon. We have to
Yeah.
organize for something, not just
Right.
what we're against, because
the prob-
you will be
yeah.
hot for moments and then you will sit down.
Right.
You know. So
Yeah, like, yeah, I'm getting tired of people just voting for because they don't want the other guy to win.
yeah.
I'm getting tired of it. We got that in this past election. Like, people voted for Biden because they didn't want Trump again. Or like in 2016, people voted for Trump because they didn't want Hillary.
Yep.
You know, it's more of, we don't want this person, so we're going to vote for the other shitty option. Instead of, we're voting for this person because they are, well, number one, we made the demand of what we want. And number two, they say they're going to give us what we want. But number three, we're going to put their foot on their ass to make sure that they do it. And if they don't, then
Yeah.
we're going to terrorize them until they do. That's the kind of attitude that we need to have in this country. But it's just kind of like, it's all wrapped up in fear, which I'm just getting so sick of.
Me too.
That that we're not going anywhere. And I feel like, it is happening on the left as well. We still kind of get caught onto that. But like I said, we need to change that. And I think we definitely need to start now. Like, we're heading to-
Otherwise,
yeah.
Like, so, and I think that's good
I'm
enough
done.
for these people. Yeah, we're done.
Please clap. And that's my rant until the next one.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
So, new people, subscribe. We appreciate that. You'll see a little URL scrolling across the page there. indienews.network. You can find that. It has links to all our stuff, our merch store, all that stuff. Indy's been working on getting all that together. Sub to the channel. Follow at Get Indie News. You know, we're a collection of lots of people. We have lots of shows. Friday night, I think we have Tara doing another stream. Sunday nights we got How Do We Miss That with me and Indy. What else we got? Mondays, Extra Bulla with Uncle Warren. Tuesday, American Tradition with Jesse Jett, who's done Sabby's intro, the famous Doobie Doobie Doo you all know so well. It's the motherfucking Savvy Sab stream.
Yeah. Wednesdays, generally us.
Yes.
And yeah, like we said, please subscribe. Again, we're trying to hit that 1,000. Once we hit that 1,000, we're able to do more. Like we're talking about, doing at least at minimum more segments
more
for INN
clips.
News.
Yeah.
So we're able to have more clips. We want to have more people come on as a result, to help us with that. But that's going to takes manpower, and money, sadly, to do that. So the sooner we get to monetization, not to say it's going to be easy because we have to work at it even more so, but it will help us to do some of the stuff that we want to do in 2023. But then it gives us more recognition to have on the guests that you guys are saying we need to have, which we'll love to have. But I feel like in this space, it's you're not necessarily credible unless you're monetized, I feel like. So not to say we want to be for that, because I'd rather do what we do, and I'm proud of what we're doing in the way that we do it, and at least build that discipline, and do it the right way versus going into all the fuckery of what it can be sometimes for some certain people, just, to get the viewership and then really lack the substance that I feel like, that I feel we try to, or at least we try to be more conscious of that and try to provide more thoughtful takes, stuff that you don't necessarily hear from, from even people that we like, and try to give you a different perspective on those things at the same time. I
agree. But yeah, keep a lookout for those videos. Keep a lookout for what's happening with Tara and on the Twitterverse. Give her some help with those trolls out there. The DNC throws plenty at people they don't like. So, she always appreciates that. But what else? Anything I'm missing? I'm sure 1,000 things.
So we are trying. So like Sabby said, she's going to have a railroad worker come on tomorrow night. So please Sabby, thank you for blessing us for a moment, just coming on INN, definitely watch her stream, see how you could support. As I said, we plugged in, we talk about mutual aid. You have an opportunity to support the railroad workers. The link is in the description if you want to support them. If you want to support me and Empower Ed, the link is also in that description as well. And yeah, like we said,
I am once again asking for your financial support.
Thank you, Bernie, even though you're a cuck. But yeah, help the workers at the same time. Help others who are in need of it. That being said, take care of yourselves. We know it's tough, especially Christmas, holidays coming up. This is a tough time for everybody financially. So do what you can. If you can't, all we ask is that you sub. We'd love, a lot of you guys help us out promoting us on the Twitters and all that. We really appreciate that. And we love you guys for it. Thank you for getting the word out there about us. We're looking to grow, and we are growing, but we can't do it without you guys. So thank you so much.
And, while you do it, avoid those labels. Because if you don't know, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, friends.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.